Hello and welcome back to my humble show. I am your host for today and every other day, the Articulate Thinker, hopefully, here to bring you art articles and articulation straight from Articulation Station, so be sure to like, subscribe, and enjoy the ride. Don't forget to turn on those bell notifications while you're at it. If you like it, put a ring on it. Sharing is caring, all that other good stuff. It has been a few days since I last recorded a show. I've tried, but I feel so insignificant in the grand scheme of things when it comes to discussing foreign policy, and in this case, well, Israel, Gaza. But I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my due diligence here, and I am no expert, so let me preface this with that. And I'll also add that every time I've attempted to talk about this, I've been stuck in limbo almost, because every time I want to cover something, not that I want to cover it, it's just that it's happening. Nobody wants to cover death and destruction. I mean, maybe some sick and twisted individuals do, but if it's happening, somebody's got to cover it. But the problem is, so much of what is being reported turns out to be false or fake 5 minutes later. And then 5 minutes after that, the story changes again. There's another plot twist, another plot turn. And so I've racked my brain, trying to get to the bottom of every little thing, but who am I? I'm over here in the United States, living in a state of peace and tranquility. For other people, not so much. I am empathetic to those people, regardless of what side they are on, if they are innocent, as indeed many casualties, fatalities of war have been. So here's a question for you up front. How many casualties of war, fatalities of war, equate to a terrorist attack? You know, if there's an attack, as there was in Israel at the hands of Gaza, or at the hands of Hamas, don't want to equate those two things. What response is appropriate? At what point is it too much? How many people must die as casualties of war, as fatalities of war, in order for it to no longer be justified as a response by the initial victims, or the military of the initial victims? Of course, Israel continues to carry out strikes in the Gaza Strip, and there is widespread, well, maybe not destruction, not quite yet, but discontentment, to say the least, including in surrounding states and nations alike. Some of those happen to be Palestinian-favoring nations, which just don't want Palestinians in their country at this point in time. Okay, so I believe there are going to be 20 trucks worth of humanitarian aid driven into a certain point of entry for Gazans, for Palestinians, tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, courtesy of, well, Israel, United States, been working together on it, trying to make it happen. And it's about time, without water, without electricity, without so many resources for so many people over there. Of course they need something, right? The fear is that it will end up in the hands of the terrorists, Hamas terrorists, as is so often the case. So I'm not sure what the specifics are going to be, how it's going to work out in the end, and what's actually going to become of the aid. But hopefully it helps someone. The right someone, of course. But yes, a lot of people taking a lot of different sides. Well, two different sides, namely. Especially after the explosion 2 days ago in a Gaza hospital, which was initially blamed on Israel. Of course it was. Understandably so, because why would Hamas bomb their own people? Oh, wait. They've done it before. Sometimes unintentionally, and that appears to be the case here, but Doesn't change the fact that the facts were spun, the narrative was spun for an entire day before people with half a brain began to realize that, oh, actually, this was a rogue rocket. Well, it was a rocket which had misfired, missed the mark, came down in a parking lot next to a hospital, Baptist hospital over in Gaza, and yes, killed quite a few people. How many people exactly? Well, that's another aspect which was twisted and turned initially, courtesy of the Ministry of Health over there in Gaza, which is basically run by Hamas. Go figure. No wonder the numbers which were first put out there were inaccurate. But now we are seeing these reports. Here's a headline from CNN Politics. Take it for what it's worth. Between 100 and 300 believed killed in Gaza hospital blast, according to preliminary U.S. intelligence assessment. All right, so the initial number was 500, at least. It kept going up and up and up. I saw some people saying as high as 1,000. And we don't even know if this is entirely accurate. There's only so much investigating you can do over there in hostile territory. Which it is. It's in Gaza, and hey, Israel is on the verge of a ground surge, a ground siege of some sort, but they're not exactly running things over there at hospitals at this point. So, what are the details? What are the specifics? Well, the U.S. intelligence community assesses that there likely were between 100 to 300 people killed in the blast of the Al-Ahli, I know I'm saying that wrong, Baptist Hospital in Gaza, and there was only light structural damage at the hospital. According to an unclassified intelligence assessment obtained by CNN, that adds more detail to the initial assessment released Wednesday, finding Israel was not responsible for the strike, which, of course, Israel agrees with, as well as the United States. Joe Biden, specifically, who was over there shortly after the attack, which wasn't actually an attack. Rogue rocket, misfired rocket. And there's actually a video of it being shot off and trailing off, and then obviously crashing down shortly after. So it happened during the night over there. The initial reports, influenced heavily by Hamas themselves, of course, were exaggerated. All deaths are sad, but I think we should be glad that the death toll was not 500 to 1,000 people. And if you're not glad about that, your priorities are misplaced. But yes, without any evidence whatsoever, people just wanted to believe Hamas. They wanted to believe the terrorists who were putting out these numbers and this information, this claim in the blame game, this claim that Israel was responsible in a way that would strategically make no sense whatsoever. Now, granted, it could have also been an unintentional strike by Israel. And I, for a time, believed that it very well may be, but on the day this happened, I tried to record a show, and I just couldn't get very far because everybody was saying something different, and there was no evidence. And my whole show was basically me saying, I have no idea what the truth is. And at least I can say that rather than speculating to the point where I'm definitively making claims which I can in no way back up. Simply because I don't trust this person or that person or this entity or that entity. Hey, I don't particularly trust Israeli military all that much either. I don't have to, but if that means trusting Hamas terrorists who set this thing in motion in the first place, aside from any historical argument that you might want to make, this series of unfortunate events was set off by Hamas terrorists. And I'm not about to believe them. First and foremost, I'm not about to believe them. I'm just not. But now that all the evidence is pointing in the direction of Hamas being responsible, well, I don't have any trouble believing that. But yes, Israel probably did not bomb Gaza Strip hospital. We judged that Israel was not responsible for an explosion that killed hundreds of civilians yesterday, 17th of October, obviously, at the Al-Ahli hospital in the Gaza Strip. The assessment states, our assessment is based on available reporting, including intelligence, missile activity, and open source video and images of the incident. Again, I listen to people all throughout the day talk about what they believed happened. Some stating more definitively than others. So many were so wrong, and I didn't want to be that person. I just wanted people to shut up for a moment, stop just using everything, anecdotally speaking, to fit their narrative, their predetermined narrative, because it's sick and twisted to do so in a time of war when there are so many casualties, so many fatalities, so on and so forth. But yes, back to the unclassified assessment, which was sent to Capitol Hill by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which added more detail to the U.S. Intelligence Committee initial assessment released Wednesday that Israel was not responsible for the strike on the hospital. The U.S. intelligence community has also estimated the number of deaths from the hospital at the low end of 100 to 300 spectrum. So it could be as low as 100 or even lower, I suppose. It's possible. According to the assessment, a lower number than figures initially cited by Hamas of more than 500. If you don't like CNN, this is reported on by Reuters and so many others at this point. The numbers may be updated, though, as more is discovered. The intelligence community observed only light structural damage at the hospital with no observable damage to the main hospital building and no impact craters, according to the assessment. And yes, as daylight rolled around, people who said this explosion is going to be so massive, the crater is going to be so massive that it could have only come from a missile shot by Israel. Yeah, they turned out to be wrong because there wasn't much of a crater at all. Structural damage was light. People are in the area at the time. Were in the area at the time. So, of course, there was going to be death and wounding. Sadly, much less in a hospital. Double dose of sadness there. But, clearly someone was putting out their propaganda at the time. And it was not Israel this time. This time. Not saying it's never, but this time. As well as many other times in this time. It has been Hamas who has been behind the propaganda. And not just Hamas. Hamas sympathizers. Terrorist sympathizers, including in Congress. Shall I say, Rashida Tlaib, who I might talk about if I have the time. I have a bunch of stuff pulled up here. I didn't mean to spend this much time just talking about this one particular article here, but can't help myself. We see only light damage to the roofs of two structures near the hospital, the main hospital building. But both structures remain intact, the assessment states, despite all of the claims that the entire hospital had been blown up. The U.S. intelligence community released its initial assessment on Wednesday that Israel was not responsible after President Joe Biden stated publicly while in Israel that the strike appeared to have been the result of an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza. Biden is giving a primetime address from the Oval Office on Thursday evening. Yeah, I have that bell notification turned on YouTube so I can catch it. Keep in mind that Joe Biden also had basically said that he had seen photographs of beheaded babies, even though he hadn't actually seen those photographs. So he does sometimes say some stuff that he can't really back up. So there's that. But in this case, he has the intelligence. Well, I don't mean he specifically has the intelligence. I just mean the intelligence community has the intelligence, and therefore he has access to it. For what it's worth. The National Security Council has said that the Biden administration plans to publicize as much intelligence as it can about the strike amid accusations that Israel was responsible for the blast. We will be sharing that information with our friends and partners in the region. We have shared as much of that information as we can publicly, Deputy National Secretary, or Security Advisor, I should say, John Feiner said on CNN this morning, on Thursday. today. The assessment states that intelligence indicates that some Palestinian militants in the Gaza Strip assessed that the explosion was likely caused by an errant rocket or missile launch carried out by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and that militants were still investigating. There's actually an audio recording from that time where two Hamas terrorists are talking to each other about how, indeed, even they believe that it came from them. From a cemetery, actually, nearby the hospital. Like I said, there's some footage of rockets being shot off in the air. There's not any footage from that time of Israel shooting off rockets in that general direction. So, the people who still, Congress people included, still to this day, to this moment in time, claim that Israel was responsible. They provide no proof whatsoever. So, clearly they are propagandists and would rather side with terrorists over life itself, I suppose. We are still assessing the likely casualty figures, and our assessment may evolve, but this death toll still reflects a staggering loss of life, the assessment states. The United States takes seriously the deaths of all civilians and is working intensively to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Feiner told CNN that the assessment of the hospital strike was a warning to the danger of drawing conclusions amid the fog of war. I think this is a cautionary note for governments in the region, and frankly for press, in response to each and every twist and turn in a conflict, he said. The Biden administration has been debating how much raw intelligence to declassify, underpinning its assessment that the deadly blast at the Gaza hospital was caused by an errant rocket from the Palestinian militant group, not a missile from Israel, according to a senior administration official. The White House believes that providing a clearer assessment of the public or to the public would be useful in trying to establish a clear and accurate narrative of events. This official said, noting it hasn't reached a conclusion about how effective raw intelligence would be in that effort. And for some people, it's not going to matter how much proof there is. The proof just is never going to be in the pudding for them, because they're going to believe what they want to believe. People who are heavily in favor of, I don't want to say Hamas, but Palestinians in general, Gazans in general, they tend to lean more towards any particular anecdote which appears to speak negatively to Israel and the Israeli military. The debate reflects growing concerns that the U.S. and Israel have lost control of the narrative spiraling out of Gaza, that Israel was to blame for those killed in the hospital blast on Tuesday evening. Yeah. Former intelligence officials and sources familiar with the current U.S. intelligence were skeptical that there was anything the U.S. might make public that would be believed in the Arab world. Unfortunately, the narratives have already spread and solidified at this point, said one U.S. official. Following a classified Capitol Hill briefing Wednesday afternoon, a bipartisan group of senators urged the Biden administration to make public as much of the intelligence as possible. A part of the focus also has to be lowering the temperatures in some of the countries that have had reasonably good relationships with Israel. Think Jordan, where a summit was canceled on Joe Biden's way over there. Yeah. Think Egypt. Senator Tom Tillis, Republican from North Carolina, told reporters on Wednesday. That's more of the focus now. As for Egypt, yeah, they've been very reluctant to take in Palestinians, Gazans who have evacuated, or at least attempted to do so. Yeah. But that could be said about several other countries, nations in the area. Let's see. I don't have a lot of time left. I did not mean to spend that much time on that one article. I do have another article pull up here from the New York Times. What we know about the explosion at the hospital in Gaza. And by the way, New York Times, among many others, were guilty of jumping to conclusions and reporting inaccurately about the blast at the hospital. So that's why I say take it for what it's worth. Take it with a grain of salt. I do appreciate any time one of these publishers puts out the accurate information after having put out the inaccurate information. But, come on. If I, as an unprofessional journalist, not that I'm even that much, can wait around and find out whatever there is to find out, then they should be able to do it since it's their job. It's what they're paid to do. Here's something Elon Musk tweeted out yesterday, or not yesterday. It has actually been a few days, but I just now saw it yesterday. This clip is 9 years old, he says, and this is a clip of Jon Stewart, Comedy Central. Hopefully, I don't have any copyright issues with this. I'd be ashamed if my entire podcast is taken down because of this one clip. I'll go ahead and play it, though.
In fact, we'll start tonight in the Middle East, where Israel...
What? Israel isn't supposed to defend itself?
Oh, yeah, if Mexico bombed Texas, will we exercise
What other country is held to the same standard as Israel?
People that want to destroy her terrorists? What's the matter with you? It's the only democracy in the Middle East, you turd!
Self-hating Jew?
Okay, so there are some jump cuts here. I don't know if this is part of the initial segment or the original segment or if it has since been edited a bit. But either way, the point remains. This is what it's like. This is what I feel like. You just scroll through your Twitter feed and you see people back and forth. You can't see anything with getting eaten alive without getting eaten alive. And yeah, a very divisive time. Like, you think people would be able to agree at least that terrorist attacks are terrible, but people can't even seem to agree on that much. But I understand that there's sometimes a fallout with the response so deadly as a response by Israel in this case. Yeah. What is proportionate? What is disproportionate? That was my question at the beginning of the podcast, and that question remains. At what point does, well, a response become disproportionate? Sorry for buffering.
That was weird. Anyway, what I was saying was last Thursday saw the start of a new ground offensive launched by Israel.
Tradition!
So even 9 years ago, the term human shields was being used. But that's accurate because that's what Hamas does. Not to say that they intentionally struck the hospital. It appears that they didn't. But there's a reason why hospitals and civilian infrastructure is getting caught up in so much of this war, because Hamas has stationed themselves directly in the middle of civilian infrastructure. So there's that. They've also in the past, for example, taken PVC pipe intended for water to be, well, brought into Gaza, the Gaza Strip. And they've used that to make missiles. So they don't really have their own people best interest in mind. And part of the reason why they're suffering right now and need humanitarian aid is because they're not being taken care of by the group which claims to be liberating them or something like that, right? They have tunnels, not bomb shelters. That's kind of how the story is going.
Holy look, obviously there are many strong opinions on this issue, but just merely mentioning Israel or questioning in any way the effectiveness or humanity of Israel's policies is not the same thing as being pro-Hamas.
So you're against murdered children?
Free Gaza! Free Palestine!
The Zionist pig!
You know what? Why don't we just talk about something lighter, like Ukraine?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Even that is interesting because of the dynamic between our, as in the United States, funding of Israel as well as of Ukraine. But wait a second. Right now, we're funding Israel, we're funding Palestinians, we're funding Ukraine, and in a sense, we've even funded Russia, thanks to Joe Biden. Certain policies which have helped them out a little bit. But yeah, that's the world we live in. This is the world we live in. And on to the next. The point with that is that it's very divisive. You can't hardly say anything without rubbing people the wrong way. So I only have a few subscribers on this channel at this point, but I may lose some of them. Talking less than negatively about Israel. I get it. A lot of people want to root for the underdog too. There's that. But there's a lot more to it than that. Historical context. A lot of stuff to take into consideration, but we should at least appreciate proof. And for those of you who might suggest that I'm just simping for the establishment or something like that, mainstream media or something like that, since when have I done that? Now, if anything, I want to disagree with them. And by the way, it's even more interesting because with the initial attack, the terrorist attack by Hamas on October 7, where they went in and ruthlessly murdered men, women, and children by land, sea, and air, and also took hostages which remain in Gaza, somewhere in Gaza, and supposedly we're not going to see we're not going to see the strikes and the ground invasion end until the hostages are returned or something like that. But I can't remember what I was saying. Honestly, I just completely lost my train of thought. Someone else who happens to do that an awful lot is Joe Biden. And no, I don't mean to laugh at anything except for him and this very dumb statement of his while he was over there in Israel. This might have been in Tel Aviv. I'm going to play this.
How about the hospital, sir? People all over the region are upset about the hospital and don't necessarily believe you or the Israelis that they didn't have anything to do with it. Do you have a message to the people in the streets right now?
Well, I can understand why in this circumstance they wouldn't believe. I can understand that. But I would not, you notice I don't say things like that unless I have faith in the source from which I've gotten it. Our Defense Department says it's highly unlikely that it was Israelis would have had a different footprint, and they've intercepted some anyway. So that's why, if you notice, I didn't say it at first. I wanted to make sure that I knew. And look, and I'm not suggesting that Hamas deliberately did it either. It's that old thing, gotta learn how to shoot straight.
Oh. So he just said that Hamas needs to learn how to shoot straight. That is a stupid statement. So you see Antony Blinken over here behind him, peeking over his shoulder, thinking, don't. What's he going to say this time? Joe Biden says he doesn't say things without a reasonable reason to say them. We know that's not entirely true, so I won't put it past him to say something inaccurate, much less incoherent. But, yeah, not the best thing to say. Not the least ironic thing to say about Hamas and their shooting capabilities. So he's basically suggesting that they need to learn to shoot straight so they can kill even more people, since that rocket was presumably intended to kill people. It just happened to kill their own people. But yeah, as for whether or not Israel did it, every bit of evidence thus far provided points to Hamas being responsible. it would be strategically stupid for Israel to have done such a thing at such a time when Joe Biden was on his way over there. If it had been an accident, I could have seen that. I would have admitted that. In fact, I was prepared to condemn Israel in their alleged attack. But that just didn't turn out to be the fact, unless you can prove otherwise. I put up an edit on my Articulate Thinker News Clips channel pointing out as much. So if you want to know some more, check out that video. Here's a little screenshot, a few screenshots. There was a clip the other day of Joe Biden in an interview saying, don't, in regards to the possibility of Iran getting involved in the conflict, more directly involved than they already are. I say that because, of course, they've backed Hamas, but, you know, the potential for them getting directly involved, that's a bad idea. But Joe Biden's response, or suggestion to them, was don't. And so I just put that as a random quote up here because I imagine that's what Antony Blinken was thinking here too when Joe Biden said that Hamas should learn how to shoot straight. Squad Representative Tlaib ignores U.S. intel about Gaza hospital, sides with Hamas over Biden administration. Hamas has continued pushing the same talking points as Tlaib, that Israel is at fault for the hospital bombing. That's what I mean by Congress members taking the word of terrorists over both Israel and United States intelligence. Not a good look for her, but hey. Since when has she cared about that? So I have a lot more here to cover, but I have to get back to work like right now. So I'm going to be on my way now. Thanks for watching. Keep in touch, keep in tune. New content is coming soon. Peace.